Connolly in San Francisco. He is the president of Agritech Capital. It's a business that helps companies combine the best of agriculture and technology sectors. Aidan, thanks very much for joining us. A lot to talk about. Not a huge surprise that agriculture tops the list again, but let's talk about that because remaining a priority, it does tie into one of the cornerstones of President Xi Jinping's government. That is reaching out to these rural and autonomous regions in an effort to lift the remaining millions in China out of abject poverty.
Yes, I think those are very important goals, and they clearly have been restated again in the #1 document. Agriculture is featured, I think, in that document now for the last 16 years. And obviously, in terms of his the process of moving towards those three rural problems, the problems of peasants, the problems of farmers, and the problems of agriculture, they always seem to feature as being the most critical ones when we read this document every year.
One thing seems clear is stable corn production moving forward, but a greater focus is going to be on soybeans and other oil beans growing in China. What do you think of that, and is that tied into the ongoing trade war with the United States?
Yeah, absolutely. So both things are very important. Firstly, corn has been subsidized in China. That has implications not just for the corn price, but of course for the price of pork, for the price of chickens, which are very reliant upon corn as being a fundamental energy source for those diets. However, the tremendous imports of soybeans and the ongoing disputes, particularly with the United States, have led to a new emphasis on producing either growing soybeans in China, or looking at alternatives such as canola, rapeseed meal as being something that should be supported.
Interesting. We also talked about how China has really focused on poverty alleviation, and of course this being the 16th year in a row that it remains a top priority. What does that say about the country moving forward? How critical is it reach its 2020 goal?
Well, we still have a tremendous number of people in the rural environment in China that are reliant upon farming as a source of income. But we also appreciate that China, in common with the rest of the world, is moving towards a consolidated agriculture with smaller numbers of farmers and increasing use of technologies, digital technologies, to grow our animals safely with better food quality at a lower cost for people living in cities who are going to be consuming that food. And of course, China is a leader in terms of artificial intelligence, so it's not surprising to see it embrace those technologies as quickly or perhaps even faster than most other economies. What is clear is that we are going to move away from seeing live animals being sold in China. We're going to see further processed food, and obviously the eventual goal is to achieve both rural stability while at the same time a safe and affordable food supply.
We have such a small area farmers are able to work, and you're talking about feeding 1.3 billion people. How critical is it to marry these two, the dirt farming and the technology?
Yeah, both of those are critical, and it's also interesting to see within this document for the first time a lot of discussion about the management of pollution, even through to the recycling of plastics on farm. So that I don't think has featured quite as heavily in the past. It is absolutely clear that China is moving towards a modern agriculture. Obviously, retention of the rural fabric, that environment is critical, but it's also embracing very much a modern future.
You know, you talk about the pollution, that's very important. I also want to talk about the waste runoff. It's this huge problem. Obviously, the environment, very important to President Xi Jinping as well. How difficult is it going to be to enforce something like that in those rural, dirt-poor areas, to keep that out of the rivers and other waterways?
Yeah, I think that China's systems are certainly capable of achieving that. I think that we face particular issues, for example, with dairy farms, but those are being addressed through much more modern milk production. You see the same thing in terms of hogs, but in the same way, pig production has consolidated from something of the order of 50 million breeding animals, sows, down to 35 million, and the farms are getting larger and much more professional. So I'd be very optimistic about what China is doing with that respect, and I don't think we're going to see the same issues that we saw in the past.
Aidan Connolly in San Francisco, thanks very much. A very rapidly changing landscape in China. We appreciate it.